Yesterday we were discussing about the fundamentals of computer. Today we'll go a little more further. Before that, I would like to just discuss a little about the yesterday's topics. We were discussing about the definition of a computer, what a computer is, how it is like, and the characteristics of a computer, etc. We are talking about data processing, what do you mean by data, what do you mean by information, etc., etc. And after that, we were talking about the evolution of the computers. Actually, yesterday I only wanted to give you a very brief idea about computers, and I didn't want you people to get a little distracted about it. But today I am going to explain you, or I would like to show you how the computer evolution has really started. From where did it start, how did it start, and all. We will discuss all of it as of now, because that is all very much required for what we do in the coming stages. And yesterday I stopped at this slide where I asked you to just go through it and search for the different kinds of computers that are available in today's world, or that were available previously. The first thing over here is Mark 1. Mark 1 is very much important evolution of the computers. Before Mark 1, we had the computer which was created by Charles Babbage. That was, in those days, generally computers were all like very much mechanical in nature. They had so many mechanical parts involved in it with very large sizes. But as technology and days passed by, the size of the computers have reduced drastically. How did it all happen? From where did it start? That is what we are going to discuss today. So generally people say that Charles Babbage was the one who had really brought in the concept of a computer with all the functionalities into it. But before that, I would like to show you something else, where this is known as abacus. Abacus was known for its calculations or computations that are possible with it. It was found nearly in the Mesopotamian civilization, where we had like around 2700 BC. In those days, they used to use this kind of a technology or a concept known as abacus. Abacus was used for calculations. Mostly we would be able to do any kind of a calculation on abacus, the basic addition, subtractions, etc. And these are still in use today. After abacus, we had something called a concept called punched cards. We will be looking into punched cards when we talk about the generations of the computer, when was it used, how was it used, and all. But before that, you should know what punch card is. Punch cards were initially, this is how a punch card looks like. Punch card is initially used to define patterns or create patterns for the textile industries, and later that technology was used to store data or to record data into the computer. How did all this happen is what we are going to discuss now. This is how an actual punch card looks like. In around in the 19th century, early 19th century, we had something called punch card. This is a punch card where there was a textile industry which had implemented this kind of a concept for creating patterns. What kind of patterns? They were weaving the cloth, and they wanted to have different designs automated by some kind of a technology or a tool. So they came up with a concept called punch cards, where they already defined a texture or a pattern on this punch card based on the holes that this card has. That was automated in such a way that the same pattern is designed onto the cloth, whatever that was being manufactured. How did all this happen? Initially, they wanted to have they have designed a punch card in such a way that whatever is the design they wanted, they had holes over there. So whenever the machine is coming across a hole, it would understand that it should take a diversion over there and then move on accordingly in the change direction. If it doesn't find a hole in its punch card over here, here is an example where it doesn't have a hole. In such cases where it doesn't have a hole, it skips that point and it just goes on further. This is how the basic idea of a punch card had started. From this idea, we had something called the punch cards that were used for the computers. How did it transform from there to here is, it's all because of Hermann Hollerith. Hermann Hollerith was a person during the 1800s where he completed his graduation at the age of 19 and he was working as a clerk in an organization. That organization had to deal with census. We all know what census is and how difficult it is to collect data and also how difficult it is to process the data that was collected. In those days, it was like it took them like around 8 years to process 1 year census. That was terribly high and it was very long period for them. And at one point where they were all very much vexed up with the situation of manually calculating or manually processing the records of the individuals, at that point Hermann Hollerith was one of the person in the team where he was working for the processing of census. At that point he had decided that there should be some kind of an machine that should be helpful for them in finding out or in helping, which would help them in processing the census data. Now what happened was, Hermann Hollerith, he took up the concept of punch cards that was previously used for the textile industries long back 80 years ago, which was implemented by an organization. Then he took up that concept and he implemented it to store data into it. We were previously talking about Charles Babbage's computer, but what all computers that we had previously, they were all only able to process data or they were only able to compute a certain information or certain instruction that was provided to it. Other than that, it was really difficult for someone to reprogram it or change the software or update the software. These kinds of things were not happening in those days. Whatever is the specific function that that computer or that instrument had, the same instruction was implemented by that tool, nothing else. There was no upgradation possible in those days, as well as it was only able to give us back data and there was no procedure or there was no way we could store the data into the computers. So in such cases, we had Hermann Hollerith with this radical idea which completely changed the industry, the practical industry that was in those days. In 1890, as you can see, in the US census, the punch cards that were introduced by Hermann Hollerith were massively used, and from 1890s onwards till until 1970s, around like 80 years, punch cards had a very important role in the computer industry. This punch cards, this is how actually the computer and the punch cards machine this would look like. And I was talking to you about the evolution of punch cards, right? So 8 years before itself in France, there was a weaving company which implemented this. And then okay, and then I was talking to you about the evolution of computers. So we were here. So in the 1890s, that was how the trend started. With the help of punch cards, they were able to store data into it. And then we had something called Mark I computer in 1937. Let's see what Mark I computer is and how it changed the industry. Mark I is generally known as the beginning era for modern computers. Mark I had established automatic sequence controlled calculator. This was a calculator or the technology that Mark I has implemented, and then in those days the main problem was with the size of the computers. We had computers around 50 feet long and 8 feet tall. Just imagine a computer with that big dimensions. It becomes really difficult to manage such applications or appliances, and they used mechanical switches. That is the main problem, or in those days that was the only way with which they could implement this kind of a technology. They used to have mechanical switches to open and close the electronic circuits, and they had around 500 miles of wire. Just imagine 500 miles of wire is like how much wire, how many connections they used to have for all the computers. And they used to have 7,50,000 parts inbuilt into the computers. Even though they had such big tools, as such big computers, as well as so many parts integrated into it, they only could establish only a few kind of functions related to the computer. They were not able to completely work with the functionality of the computers. And then we had one more interesting and the major transformation in the computer technology was the ENIAC. ENIAC is defined, it was the first completely electronic based computer. Until then we had computers which were based upon the mechanical parts, or the circuits were controlled totally by the mechanic parts, such as the gear shafts. So many were used while manufacturing or while using the computer. But ENIAC is the first of its kind computer which is totally electronic based, and it has all the functionalities that are required for the computer. That is where our transformation had started, and from there we have grown into this position. Let's see the generations of the computers. It has 5 different stages or the generations. So, as we spoke about generations yesterday, it's not only about a single organizations or the Intel processor generations that we are going through, but a major change or major transformation in the technology that happened in the computer industry. Based on that, we have divided it into 5 generations, and you can see them over here. The first kind of a generation is from 1942 to 1955. Until then, you can just correlate between the things that we have already discussed till now, where we were talking about Mark I, ENIAC, as well as the previous Charles Babbage computers. All these, if you correlate, there is a sequence of events that happened from 1800, where it started with punch cards for just defining patterns or for just weaving patterns. From there, it shifted towards something which is very massive, and also in 1800 it all started with the weaving of the punch cards, and then in 1880 onwards, Hermann Hollerith, he came up with the technology of storing data or recording data into the computer through punch cards. From there, it slowly revolutionized, and in 1942 finally we could come up in that kind of an era, we could come up with something that would be really called as the first generation for the computers. So, let us see what do we have in the first generation of computers. The technological hardwares that we have in this kind of a computer is vacuum tubes, electromagnetic relay memory, punch card, secondary storage. We'll discuss about vacuum tubes, electromagnetic relay, but before that, that's why I wanted to explain about punch cards. Punch cards were used as a secondary storage. As today we are using hard disks or the storage devices that we have to store the data, the same way they had just these punch cards. As you have already seen the images for punch cards, they were just like a thin paper on which they had punched holes. Based on the holes and based on the parameters they had for those punch cards, it was understandable for those who were operating the computer, and it was also understandable to how the data was stored and what kind of data is stored in the punch card. And let's talk about vacuum tubes now. Vacuum tubes, this is how a vacuum tube generally looks like. Vacuum tubes are nothing but they used to act as a diode or a switch in the electrical circuits that were present in the computer. These days we have the transistors or the IC chips that are integrated into the motherboard, but previously in those days when we didn't have the technology of the chips and the transistor, we used to use vacuum tubes. Vacuum tubes helped us and played a very crucial role in those days, where they acted as a switch to the circuits. It used to it was integrated into the computer, and there were hundreds of thousands of vacuum tubes available in each computer for its performance. This is how the ENIAC looks like. You can just imagine how tall it is, how big the computer was. These are known as the vacuum tubes. You can see there are different companies that manufacture the vacuum tubes, and these vacuum tubes were integrated into these components, into this computer. This is how an actual computer looked in those days. From that kind of a stage, we have evolved to something which is very much finite. And this was how the vacuum tubes were all placed, and based on the connections and based on the operation that the computer was performing, we were manually changing the connections and also making the operation happen. So that is about vacuum tubes. And coming back to this first generation of computers, then this is all about the hardware part. We had electromagnetic relays in those days, where it really helped us in transferring the memory, and then we had the software part. This is all about the hardware, and then when we move on to the software part, we have the machine and assembly languages. Machine and assembly language is so important for any computer, because even in today's world, without the machine and assembly language, we are not even able to make a single step internally inside the computer. Machine language is something that is understood by the computer. It is all based upon the zeros and ones language. Generally, machine language is described as zeros and ones, where 0 and 1 play an important role over there. And assembly language is something where we have a set of instructions, and each instruction has its own code. Based on the instruction code that we provide, the computer understands that code, and it will implement the instruction that is required according to the code. That is about assembly language. Generally, when we talk about machine language, it's all binary format. Binary in the sense 0 and a 1. So in such a case, when a circuit is implementing inside the computer, what happens is, if there is an output or if there is something that needs to be passed from one point to the other, the gates or the electronic devices that are present inside the computer, they give an output. If there is an output, that will be a 1. That means that it is a true. While if there is no output, then there will be a 0. The same way, every number in the number systems can be converted into a binary form. Binary form, we all know how to convert it into a binary form, where if we have some time, I will explain you about it. But before that, you have to understand whatever instruction that we are providing to the computer, that is converted into binary form, and that binary form is understood by the computer. And before, when I was talking to you about ENIAC had one more special feature, that was the first computer that was able to be reprogrammable. Previously, all the computers whatever we had until Mark 1, they were all only related to your whatever specific instructions or processes that were required, they would only be able to do them. But starting from ENIAC onwards, these were the first kind of electronic computers which were reprogrammable. If we would like to add in a little more instructions or different instructions required to our processes, we were able to change it and reprogram it. So, this was known as the first generation of computers, where we could stored program concept was introduced. Stored program in the sense, we were able to put in some instructions to the computer, and those instructions were stored, and based on the instructions, the computer used to perform its operations. In those days, mostly only the organizations had to process so much data, like the railways or the other government agencies and the scientific and the military organizations. Only they used to perform or use the computers, because as we have seen in the images, they were really bulky, expensive, very difficult to manipulate or operate. They had so many issues with it, but that was much more better in those days as a technology evolution. As we have seen the key characteristics for the first generation of computers, they are very much bulky in size, they are highly unreliable. You couldn't actually predict, or they weren't much accurate. Then limited commercial use, only the big organizations or the organizations which had to deal with very much huge amount of data, only they used to use them, and it's very much difficult to use. So it all started with the ENIAC, and then we had different kinds of computers that had followed after the ENIAC version. And then after the first generation from 1942 to 1955, we had the next generation of computers, the second generation of computers. These were from 1955 to 1964. The most important change in the first and second generation is the use of transistors. In the first generation, for around 15 to 20 years, we were only working based on the vacuum tubes, and vacuum tubes are very much large in size and they were very difficult to handle. But after a transformation towards transistors, yesterday I was talking about semiconductors and the relation we have with chemistry and the and the chemical elements that are present in that. Transistors are all based upon the semiconductor technology, where silicon, germanium, these and the gates, logic gates, different gates that we have. Based on all this, the transistors are defined, or they are circuits that are based on these components. We used transistors because they were very much small in size and they were much more efficient than the vacuum tubes that we were using. So the comparison over here is, previously the first generation we were using vacuum tubes, next we had transistors. The same way we had electromagnetic relay memory over there, but when it comes to the second generation, we shifted towards magnetic core memories. Magnetic core memories are those memories where we could digitally store data into the computers, and then the magnetic tapes. Magnetic tapes are also the same way, but you must have you can just go through the internet and you can search for magnetic tape images, where you will be able to understand what kind of devices they were. And over here, 1955 to 1964, at this point we started using disks for secondary storage. Even though we started to use disks for secondary storage, punch cards which were replaced by this disk, punch cards were there until 1970s. where it because any technology that had so much impact for so many years, it takes a little time to shift towards them. So even though magnetic tapes were secondary discs for secondary storage were available for us in the market, it took us a little time to shift towards them. That we have to understand. And then when it comes to the software, what was the difference between them is batch level programming system, batch level operating system. In the batch level operating system, what happened was they had whatever processes that need to be done or whatever instructions that need to be executed next, all those were queued, or they were divided or segregated into different batches. These batches, they at one single time they were all operated, and then in batch wise they were operated. So what happened, if we had like 100 processes to be done or 100 tasks to be done, they would divide it into 5 batches, and each batch had 20 of them. At one single time, one batch was being processed. Like that, they used to shift different batches, and they used to have different processes implemented. And then we have the high level programming languages over here. This was the era where the actual programming languages started. The high level programming languages that we know today are somewhat different from what they used to use in those days. We used to have various languages like COBOL, and even some languages we are using it today also, like C, C++, etc. Then this second generation computers were mostly focused on scientific and commercial applications. Even then, we didn't have the full-fledged use of the applications or computers into the real world. They were only restricted or limited to a few organizations, and they were not available to the public. And then what would be the difference in their key characteristics is that the first generation had very much, they were not at all reliable, we couldn't even trust them much. But the second generation were really fast, more reliable, easy to program than the previous one. The reason is all because of the transistors that we were using. Transistors helped us a lot in shifting our technology from vacuum tubes towards the technology that we are using today. And then commercial production was still difficult and costly because we didn't have that equipment to manufacture, or we didn't have the proper equipment to process the computers. There are few companies or few organizations that had their computers in the second generation, like Honeywell had its Honeywell 400, IBM came up with 7030, and then Univac Clark was one more kind of a computer. And then we had the third generation. Third generation is very much interesting because they had the concept of ICs integrated into it. It started around 1964 and it went on till 1975. ICs are nothing but integrated circuits. Previously we used transistors, but those were not much efficient, like even though they were much more efficient than the vacuum tubes that we were using, but still we couldn't get it at a cheaper price, or we couldn't manufacture them at lower prices. So ICs really played an important role in the fabrication process where they were produced, and also we had the production cost reduced a lot with the help of ICs. ICs had so many circuits integrated into them, into that small chip, and these technologies helped us reduce the size of the computers too. In the second generation, we were talking about magnetic core memories that were very much with a very smaller size of memory, but in the next generation they extended it towards a larger magnetic core memory, and we also had larger capacity disks and magnetic tape secondary storage. previously if you just go back and check, around 10 years back or 15 years back, we used to have DVDs like 4.7 GB or 700 MB CDs were available. In those days, around 10-15 years back, those CDs and DVDs were really of so much data for us. But in the last decade, if you see, there is a transformational shift around the technology, and we are even if we have a 1 TB of storage space also, it isn't being sufficient these days. The reason is that every time as days pass by, the storage capacities are increasing. There is a lot of demand for additional storage as there is so much data being generated. Also, there are various kinds of formats with so many different qualities of data, which is demanding for higher amount of storage capacities. These storage capacities, as they are increasing, the cost of the storage capacity is also decreasing. The same way, initially they had very less magnetic core capacities, and later they increased it to a larger one. The same way we can, in the third generation, we had the introduction for mini computers. Mini computers were the introduction for family computers, where you can call them like your personal PCs, or which could be used to perform little operations that were required by any individual. It was not operated only by someone or a technically trained person or a group of people. It was not like that. And the kind of operating system that we had was time sharing operating system with standardization. The high level programming languages that were there, they were all being standardized because they were all born previously with their into their infant stage, and then later based on the issues that we had in the second generation, we formalized, we standardized the high level languages that we are using today. And then if you compare the second and third now, this is even more faster, smaller, more reliable, easier and cheaper to produce. This is the main thing over here, because we were using ICs. Vacuum tubes were very difficult to handle, very difficult, and it was very costly. Then we had transistors. Transistors helped us much more than the vacuum tubes. After that, we had the ICs, which helped us mainly with the production part, because with the help of ICs we were able to produce them at very cheaper price. And then we had different kinds of computers that were available in the third generation. Now coming to the fourth generation, this also used ICs, but the most important thing over here is they have been integrated with the VLSI technology. VLSI technology is nothing but, VLSI stands for very large scale integration. What do you mean by that? There were like hundreds of thousands of circuits or transistors, whatever that they were including into that chip. They were all integrated into that small tiny chip. With the help of that, what happened? Previously, when you compare with the vacuum tubes had occupied so much space. There was requirement for so much space because each vacuum tube was very large, and you need to had so many hundreds of vacuum tubes integrated into like connected to the computing system. So from then we slowly reduced the size towards transistors, but even transistors, they were a little big, and the architecture of the computers were not that smaller as what we are using today. With the help of ICs and VLSI technology, we were able to integrate hundreds of thousands of circuits into a very small tiny chip. With the help of this, we were able to integrate more applications, or we are able to perform more applications in the computers with the help of this technology. And also we had microprocessors, semiconductor memories. Microprocessors are nothing but they are the small chips that had a piece of code into it, which would instruct the computer in whatever direction it has to do and whatever task it has to perform. And semiconductor memories are nothing but the RAM and ROM that we are using in the today's world. They had, as it was integrated with the VLSI technology, these RAM or the RAM means random access memory, and ROM means read only memory. This RAM is something which we all know in today's world, where we have different technology of RAM used in our mobile phones, as well as in the different kind of technology used in the laptops or personal computers. Let's talk about the personal computers RAM. This RAM, if you if you zoom into, or if you try to understand the components that are integrated into this RAM, this small chip is like 4 GB, 8 GB or 2 GB, different kinds of storage spaces are there for the RAM. How is it able to integrate so much space into that small chip? Is because of the VLSI technology. Because previously in the 1975 to 1989 or until the early 2000s, we had RAM of very small sizes, like around 512 MB. That was like very huge size of RAM that was used. The size of RAM was only up to MBs. That too 512 MB is really high. 128 MB, 256 MB. This kind of storage RAM we used to have. Because we were able to only integrate hundreds of thousands of circuits into one single chip. And in the next generation, I will be talking to you about something that we are in the present world we are using, that is ULSI technology. Then you will understand the difference between the size and the requirements that we had now and previously. And coming to the key technology is software technologies, operating systems for PCs with graphical user interface and multiple windows on a single terminal screen. This was all possible when we were able to integrate our VLSI technology with into the ICs. And then we have the multiprocessing operating system, because we were able to process more number of processes at a time with the help of these circuits, because into a small chip we were able to integrate so many circuits, and these circuits helped us in processing the tasks that we were trying to implement. Then we had Unix operating system. Unix is like the base for any kind of an operating, like it would be the base for you to learn, or if you to explore as an operating system. Windows would be very much easy, and it is much more towards the user level, where there would be much difficulty, but to understand the core technology or how the computer is being operated or how is it functioning, you definitely have to try Unix operating system and move towards it. Unix, or these days we have Linux, which is based on the fundamentals of Unix itself. Next, we had object oriented programming design. This is all related to computing, the kind of programs they used to write. They used to be based on the object programming, object oriented design. And then we had PCs, network based and supercomputing applications. Supercomputing applications are very interesting concept. I would suggest you to just go through it or search for it on the internet. Then with the help of VLSI, we were able to get small, affordable, reliable and easy to use PCs. That was the time when we were introduced with Apple computers and the IBM PCs. They were like small square kind of monitor boxes with a very like rectangle kind of CPU boxes. That was totally different from what we are using today, but it is much that was so much for so much technology in those days. And then now we have the last generation, that is the 5th generation, which is still continuing till today. That is from 1989 to the present. We had the ULSI technology. I was talking to you about VLSI previously. ULSI is ultra large scale integration. This had like millions of transistors or circuits integrated into one small tiny chip. With the help of, when you are able to integrate hundreds of thousands of circuits into one chip, we were able to get some data that is around MBs, like 128 MB, 256 MB, 512 MB. We were able to get data up to that storage capacity. But when we tried to integrate the ULSA technology and we bought in this technology, we were able to manufacture, or we are able to provide the users with much more higher capacity, higher storage capacities, because as we are integrating millions of transistors into the chips, we are even more able to provide much more space. That is the reason previously when we had, it is all based upon the circuits that are there in the IC. If you have a very few circuits inside your IC, based on the circuits it provides you the space, and accordingly the storage level storage medium is provided in that chip. But if you are adding in even more circuits, like if you are adding 1000 circuits, then it will be much more, you can add a little more storage. Like the same way, if you are adding in hundreds of millions of circuits into one chip, you will be able to provide even more storage. That is how today we have all the 4 GB, 8 GB, 16 GB kind of RAMs. And this is where we are into distributed operating system, multi-threading. Just have a basic idea, or just try to remember the terminologies over here. This slide is very important for us, because based on the terminology that is there here, we are going to talk about them, discuss about them in the future classes, or wherever you have technology. You should be able to understand this. Only when you try to understand whatever terminologies are present over here, you will be able to link them to the present world and understand even better. So, the first thing over here is microkernel based operating multi-threading distributed operating system. This is all like, each line has its own meaning, and it's very vast. You cannot like explain in one single thing where what is microkernel based or multi-threading. Multi-threading is again a different concept. And distributed operating system. Distributed operating system in the sense, previously we didn't even have a computer which would perform all the tasks for us. Then we had computers with storage spaces. After that we had dedicated computers which would perform all the operations or tasks for us. After that we are now into a technology where distributed operating systems, where a number of computers are connected together and all of them share the tasks and they perform accordingly. That is where we have reached now. And we have the parallel programming libraries like MPI. This part you can just remember them. And Java is a programming language that is widely used in the applications that we are using today. All the mobile applications previously, before Android, they had Java based applications. The underlying programming language was Java in those applications that we used. And the World Wide Web, internet had so much to do with the technology. The same way we had portable computers, powerful, cheap, and we'll discuss something very important tomorrow, that is the computer organization, architecture and all. I suggest you to just go through the different types of computers we have and what kind of technology did they provide, how did they operate. That will be a very interesting concept, but if you understand that very well, the technologies that we are using today, that will be very much helpful to you. That's it for today. Thank you.